Welcome to the Top M&A Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today, I have a guest, Reg Zeller. Reg is from Aram Foundry. He's done a number of acquisitions. How many acquisitions, Reg?
Six so far. We literally signed our LOI for our seventh one about an hour ago.
Congratulations. He's a serial acquisition entrepreneur. So we are going to talk about that story, Reg.
I love it.
How did you get started? I see on LinkedIn you worked at a number of Fortune 500 companies, right?
Yep. Yeah. So the simple answer is grew up in a small town, knew a lot more people that did small business type work than anything else, ended up inside of big corporations for 17 years, ran into a bad boss. Had always thought this will be great to do something myself. So ended up doing exactly that. That would have been August of 2016. Started looking for a business, found it. First business I actually had ever walked through. It was a foundry or a small business that I looked at a bunch of Sims, but nothing really caught my eye. And then found this one, walked in 4 months later, bought it.
Yeah. So where did you find it? Was a broker or?
Yeah, I'd networked a little bit, and it was someone who knew somebody and said, "Hey, this sell biz buy thing," which it took me a long time to figure out it was actually biz buy sell, to go figure out where to even find this business to look for it, type of thing. But yeah, it was being done through a local broker, a husband and wife. It was one of those things where dad had started it back in the 40s, and then this guy had taken it over, who was in his late 60s by the time I bought it, and none of the family wanted to be involved. So
yeah,
kind of the classic, especially in the manufacturing side of small business. It's
you're kind of
that story 101.
Yeah, you're so what made you decide to work on talk about boring? I mean, this is Andrew Carnegie got his stuff where you're buying these foundries, but these are non-ferrous foundries, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so it's mainly aluminum. Generally speaking, for people, what it amounted to is when I graduated, seven undergrad in electrical engineering, everybody that I graduated with went into computers, software, etc. I went in and did more manufacturing, generally speaking. So it was one of those things where just continued to grow up in manufacturing. When we were working there, so my last 4 years roughly of being in corporate as a general manager, one of the divisions at General Electric, and just thought that there was a real need for local US based manufacturing. I think there's absolutely a need for product being manufactured in Mexico and India and China and everywhere else, but there's also a niche of products and a need to build those here in the US. So didn't really care what manufacturing. I'd run so many different manufacturing operations in my life that it was, I would say, a little bit of a widget. Didn't really matter to me what widget it was. Happened to find a foundry for sale that I could buy 100% of with an SBA deal. And, here we are 5.5 years later and about to do number 7.
That's fantastic. So what do foundries in the middle of the country look like in revenue and multiples? And was the seller kind of reasonable about his asking price?
For sure. Yeah, we actually, for them, it was much more about their legacy. Again, this is what I've found a lot of times. These things have been family owned. Typically it was a lot of times grandpa came home from the war in the 40s, started a business, and they're in the middle of the country. They're no different than if you're on the coasts. We own them, kind of all over the country right now. So that's the big thing, is that, it's like all small businesses. Well, maybe not all, but most of them anywhere from 2 to 5 times earnings type numbers. The more impaired they get, the lower that multiple is. We bought a few of them for 1 or 2 times earnings, but in the same thing, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% of foundries across the country are already private equity owned. We're below what private equity or micro private equity would look at for individual shops. But now that we've put all these things together, certainly have a lot of conversations with the private equity guys or strategic buyers that are interested in what we're doing. But we're not for sale. We're going to keep, I own 100%, done everything with debt. We're now past the place where, we're into traditional debt financing. So, now it's just as fast as we can.
You can't
roll them up.
Yeah, you can only borrow, what is it, $5 million from SBA in a 10-year period? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you get you can get up to a total, and there's a lot of banks that'll get you a secondary loan to get you to, seven, eight, $9 million. But, once you get into that 15, 20 and above, yeah, anytime you get, I mean, they used to kind of a hard number was $5 million before you get into traditional financing. They're becoming a little bit looser with that over the last few years. Just has been so much money sloshing around in the system. But at the same time, this is really, I would say, an interesting market that, once you get to it, it doesn't look any different in traditional finance when you get above that $5 million for sure. So, it's
So what is that first business you looked at and you decided on? How many times did you visit, drive to there and meet the owner and like develop in this relationship
yeah.
and making sure that, he looked into your eyes and goes, I like this guy. He's going to continue my legacy. I think, and take care of my employees.
Yeah. Yeah. So we met, I think we met 3 times at length. So kind of a first visit, and then brought my wife back for the second one. And then the third one, we did a couple of deep dives throughout probably a 2-3 hour period. And then we met not at that place, but as we progressed down, met them for coffee a couple of times, met some of the key customers, met some of the key employees, et cetera, so that, it wasn't interrupting per se the day-to-day operations, but at the same time, had this plan and this path of what direction they were comfortable with us going, as well as that we were comfortable with doing it. And so it's an interesting story because we actually, our bid was $1 million under what the top bid was. So,
so it was getting multiple bids.
Oh yeah. There's 50 some bids on the facility within the first, I think, 3 weeks, 4 weeks being on the market with LOIs, I should say.
Wow. That's a lot of bids. I mean, coming from California and you look at all these technology companies,
right?
You would think that a foundry would just sit there for months and months and months going, yeah.
Now they would. Different story, 5, 6 years. I mean, there's a lot of businesses, I think. I mean, there's a lot of foundries. It's really hard to do business in California for foundries simply because of some of the environmental and whatnot. But yeah, the highest number of foundries, the biggest concentration in the country is, between the Rust Belt and California. Big thing out there, California way, is aerospace. We're just choosing. I don't want to deal with the government regulations. We will not be buying a foundry in California. I don't need that headache in my life. We've got enough of them as it is.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think convinced the seller to go with you and $1 million under other bids?
Yeah, there's 2 things. One was obviously the relationship that had to get developed. I think people, especially if you're going to buy a small business, that tends to be very rare that people understand that it is about the relationship. This is their baby. They've probably worked in it since they were a kid, or the business may have been around before they were. They knew all the customers, all the employees. They've been to weddings and graduations and funerals and whatnot. And they, especially if they've owned it for 30, 40 years, they've got plenty of money. It's less about the money and it's more about continuing a legacy and ensuring all of their folks are taken care of. And on the other side, he understood, the seller, that if we would have done as an individual financer of what some of the other bids were in lean years, we would have had a real problem dealing with debt service. So he went and penciled it out and kind of said, all right, well, I kind of understand, roughly speaking, what your payments are going to be. And I understand what bad years may occur. And we don't want you to have to do anything dumb, cutting workers, firing workers, or, cutting costs and hurting kind of the brand and the legacy, or you personally having a problem. So, we're rather like, we agree your number, we understand how you got there, and we agree with the concept that this protects you from the downside and protects our business for the long term.
Did you make some kind of guarantees like, hey, we're not going to fire people, we're going to keep the name, we're going to keep the legacy, or change things too much, like scare people?
No, I think that, it's just, if you go buy a business and you don't know anything about it and you start changing things all the time, you're going to get what you deserve. So that's a whole different story. It's like starting any new job, take 60 or 90 days at a minimum to learn, build trust, build the relationships. The thing I say to everybody is, at a minimum, don't change anything in your workers' lives unless it's purely for the good. And there'll be ways that they'll interpret things that you think are good that aren't. So if it's short of giving them a raise, everything else they're going to figure out how to catastrophize and have a problem with it. So you have to be very careful. You can tell them, hey, we're changing you over to this payroll system, but you actually are going to be paid, differently, but more. Or, hey, we're changing benefits. Their healthcare benefits are better. And somehow that turns into, oh my God, they're cutting costs. And now they're going to fire us. Like, well, it's an interesting rabbit hole to go down right there. I'm like, I didn't quite get from point A to point B by saying that I was making your life better.
See, I'm going to pay you more, and benefits are better.
Yeah. Oh my God. And somehow that'll be viewed as a negative. So, it's just kind of a do no harm mentality. But it was just talking through them. They kind of told me what their view of the world was. Told them kind of what I was looking to do with the business and how I wanted to handle it. Wouldn't say that, revisionist history would be nice to say I planned on doing this big roll up across the country like we're doing, but I had an idea it was possible, but
it wasn't a roadmap that you wrote down and say, hey, I'm going to acquire 7 foundries.
No, I mean, I'd done some M&A roll ups in my corporate days, so I certainly knew it was feasible, but I couldn't barely spell SBA as the joke I normally make. I had no idea how you find financing. I didn't know what a business broker was or how these things actually transacted in the small space. Now everybody knows of search funds and ETA and all these acronyms. Then someone asked me like, "Oh, you did a self-funded search and entrepreneurship through acquisition," and I didn't know what that was 18 months ago. So like, I don't know. I just went to a bank and gave them cash, and they gave me money to buy a business. That's the extent of what I knew about how any of these terms worked and how. So, been an interesting.
So, what did you do with the business? I mean, let's say first 100 days you didn't change it. Did you put things in place to improve it, operational excellency, or just?
It was mainly no. I mean, it was more about learning the industry. We didn't really do hardly anything. The business was flat to down over the last few years. I mean, the old owners, they had no desire, and this is pretty typical in any of these small businesses. They didn't they'd been at it. They had money. They could have grown. They just chose not to want to have to spend that amount of time.
They weren't pushing themselves.
No, they weren't. They were spending 3 months a year in the Bahamas and 2 months a year at their lake cabin, and spent a bunch of other time driving around the country in an RV, and would get back to customers in 45 or 60 days. So it wasn't it was an interesting situation, but
good way to
we
stop.
changed some of the simple stuff, and we started telling our customers that we were open for more business, and that we just did nothing more. Kind of the only thing that I instilled in our folks, which is pretty simple to think about, is number one, keep employees healthy and safe. Number 2, take care of customers. Number 3, build a quality product. Number 4, deliver that on time. And then number 5, think about profit. And that's about the only thing that we did early on. And just by doing those, say, simple things, getting back to customers, making sure that we were doing the right thing.
Let me ask you, was that hard? Because that culture kind of rolls downhill from the founder. And if whoever's there right now is not getting back, I mean, how did your new culture jive with this old culture?
Yeah, I mean, they were happy to see the business grow, and I mean, they had a great culture already. It's just that the new business they weren't interested in doing. The existing business, they had teams in place, everything was great, take care of the customers, do whatever they needed to do. But it was like, new business, that takes a lot of work, or I'd rather hang out on my boat in the middle of the Bahamas. And I totally get that. When I'm 67, I really hope I'm doing the exact same thing, to be perfectly honest with you. But hopefully the business is not reliant on me in any way, shape, or form by then, or I've really screwed something up. So, the culture adapted really well. That's one of the big things we actually look for. Same thing I used to look doing M&A inside of corporate America. it's really hard to fix culture. It's brutal to merge two different cultures together. So that's another thing we look for now.
Yeah, I don't think you can. I mean,
add-ons.
I've read some books about that $1 billion mistakes, and it's always the culture that doesn't
Yeah.
jive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's, now we got a playbook. We know exactly what we're running, but we still go in. So there's, roughly speaking, in these small foundries that we have, there used to be about 770 of them pre-COVID. Admittedly, I don't know exactly how many there are. We've talked to a little over 600 of them across the country. So we have an exact playbook of where we're going to go next, how we're going to do it, which ones we want to buy. We know who's got the best, well, we can perceive at least to be culture, but they have the best reputations, good people, whatever it might be. So we tend to go find one in an area that becomes what we call our beachhead.
And they already know you. They know who you are.
Yeah.
They've got your email address, and they're
if I don't know them, like the one we're buying right now, I talked with him 3 years ago, and so he said, "Hey, went through this stuff. I won't get into details. Doesn't really matter." He said, "But jump on an airplane. Let's figure out how to get this done." And so we've done a couple other deals. Our last one we did in Cincinnati, I hadn't talked to them because they were technically a captive foundry. And so they just knew, and they talked to somebody in the industry and they said, "Oh yeah, call Reg. He's buying these things." And kind of
you have to enlighten me. What's a captive foundry?
Sorry. So captive would be just building something. Like if you're Ford, you own your own foundry and you're only building product.
Okay.
For us, we would be more of an OEM foundry. So someone can come to us, we'll build
open to bids from anybody.
Yeah. And different area is different.
The first one, Ermark, did you take the role as general manager or president and go to the office every day, or did you have a number two that you worked with or install or hire a GM?
Yeah, so there were people who were running the shop, kind of the day-to-day manufacturing, and there were people who were running the office side of it, but I really took on more or less everything else. So my background, having done GM work, GE, you get finance whether you like it or not. I've got an MBA as well, so helped out a bunch with some of the finance with our office manager who didn't have that background. And on the other side of it, for the folks who were, for me, it was really marketing, sales, just ensuring people were getting called back, taking care of customer problems. And then it was really about networking and growing and getting to know our folks, both internally and then the people that we were working with. And so the big thing with the people that we were working with that I found out was that I would literally just go grab small part deliveries and I would go meet people and I'd find out exactly what was going on at our customers. And they'd be like, "Oh, it's great you brought this. Your other competitors, they don't deliver on time. They've got this quality problem. They've got this." And so then, it was leverage points. So I probably learned as much just getting out, talking to people, developing the relationships, et cetera. And so with that, and I think a big part of it was as then people spread out. So if you were a buyer at one company and you moved to a different company, then all of a sudden it became, "Hey, those guys over there are doing really good work. We should go talk with them." And that just kind of started to spread from a customer standpoint. And then from a competitor standpoint, as I just went around. So the first 18 months, I pretty much ran all the day to day. And then 6 months spent going to buy the second one and 6 months integrating it, and then turned it over, hired a president to run everything. And since then, I haven't done any of the day to day. I'm literally now just kind of a CEO, M&A. That's really my only role that I have left in the company.
Why did you buy the second one? What was the inspiration to go? I know that you had the M&A experience in the other jobs. Was your ultimate goal to say, I just want to acquire more, or I'm trying to get the multiple up where 1 + 1 = 3? Or what was it? Yeah.
I had no idea. Multiple arbitrage, and what I'm learning now has had nothing to do with my thought process. It was purely that we had some equipment we needed to control our own destiny, and it was $1.5 million to buy that piece of equipment, and I could go acquire a business for $225,000 with a book of sales as well. So I guess
that's an awesome idea.
Yeah. And so it was substantially easier to go acquire, pick up, move in, and integrate the two facilities. So that acquisition, I would say probably, man, I'm gonna have a tough time guessing at it, but it probably returned us 20x within the 3 years we've owned it, if
Yeah.
not more.
How'd
And
you
I'm saying,
finance that? You didn't need to go to the SBA for that. You could just,
no, we did an equipment financing loan through a local bank and then cash.
yeah.
So it was nice and easy. It was
Is the seller still with the business or is he off?
no,
Gone?
none of our sellers are involved in any of the businesses.
Yeah.
We typically, especially, I mean, partly right, we end up buying these when no other family wants in. They're in their 60s. They've kind of run it. So we don't have anybody that typically lasts much more than 6, 8, 10 weeks. First time we did one of these, it was a weird situation, but yeah, they were out of the business in 6 weeks for the most part. They came back and helped me, but they're like, yeah, you're doing well. Don't worry about it. You're good. You'll be fine. And
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
we're going on our boat in the Bahamas. We're good.
We're done. Good for them.
Figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was no
So
problem.
why did you buy the third one? I mean, now we have a couple of options to control your destiny.
Yeah.
It was either to get a 1+1 = 3,
Yeah.
or just I got to acquire to grow bigger. It's like the
Yeah. So our key insight to what we're
imperative.
doing- yeah, it was just we just realized that there's a simple bifurcation of customers in our world. One is the big, GE, Honeywell, Siemens, you name it, the big manufacturers in the world. They're happy to give, 95% of all their purchases from foundries will be overseas. And then they'll want to split up their last 5%. They don't want, they want to make sure if your small foundry burns down, they have a secondary supplier. Well, in our case, as soon as we got multiple facilities, we eliminated that risk. So now we'll get 100% of their business. We just become an easier, it's like, hey, deliver a quality product on time. The rest of it, we don't really care about. The other side of our customer.
So that's kind of like a vertical integration, all right?
Yeah. But it's just it's geographically dispersed though, right?
Yeah.
So right now we're in Minneapolis, Kansas City, Cincinnati, and New Hampshire. And then we've got, there's the one we're doing right now that I mentioned. And then we've got 13 others that we have kind of lined up that are in the funnel that are going to go through the process at some point in time as well. But then, then the other side, the second set of our customers are the small local places. Grandpa had an idea, dad had an idea. It was a small company, whatever it might be. And they love to be able to get up, get their kids off to school in the morning, drive in, shake hands, have lunch, head back home, and time for dinner. And so then they have to be within kind of 4 hours to do that. So we just have big concentric circles all over the country, and we go in and investigate in a local region who might be the best foundries to look at to purchase and who we'd want to tuck in after that. Make a map, go talk to everybody. And we just realized, the more we can do that, the better off we are. So
yeah, I mean, that's what Amazon does. We got a, Amazon distribution house, and it's like, I can place an order today and maybe get it at 4 p.m.
Yep.
That is just crazy.
Yeah. And it's not quite that fast in the
yeah. Of course not, but it's the same strategy.
It's the same thing. Yeah. It's just instead of having to get every single thing bigger, and it's not really a hub and spoke. It's more of a mesh network mentality. So we can run center of excellence type concepts. So, we're now large enough that we can buy the best foundry equipment pretty much in the world. And we can do that at a small foundry. They can still serve small customers. We don't have to go chase big customers. We don't have to go chase low margin, unprofitable work. We're able to balance and say, oh, that production should be run over there. Like, we're slow here, or this is a more efficient machine. We should be building it there. And so that's kind of how the network effects, just the scale efficiencies, continue to compound on each other. And just
that's if you ever read the Andrew Carnegie's biographies, he talks about that. He's like, they had to update the foundries every, I don't know, 5-10 years to get better efficiency, because more and more people were getting into the business of steel. And
it's kind of going the other way now. There's less and less people getting into the business of foundries, especially in this country, right? But I think that it's one of those things where, and that's a running joke. It's funny you keep mentioning Carnegie, because that's what my buddies, they think this is more just hilarious, right? GMs at places like Meta and Microsoft and Amazon. Literally, that's my golf group I have this afternoon that I'm going to play with. And I think it's hilarious that I'm in the foundry industry. So I always get the picture whenever I say I'm going to do another deal and can't show up for golf, then I get the little picture of, hey, Andrew Carnegie, he died with out any friends too, just like you're going to at the rate you're going. So yeah, it's the running joke.
But he was
my
the
buddies,
richest man on the planet for a while.
I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that. I'm that won't be my life. But
Yeah. How did you start financing these others like the Patriot, Superior, Cushman?
So we did after we got done with the SBA. So you can only get to that. We mentioned that 5 million and then a few on top of it. The SBA is a great program. It's about the only option when you're going to start, as an initial wanting to buy a small business. But after you get through it, get a few more, build a track record of success, you can go to some of these smaller local and regional banks, especially ones that have done business with these places forever. So the one that we did, for instance, I'll just use one as an example. The one in Kansas City, the grandparents that had the foundry initially were friends with the grandparents that started the bank. And so they'd known them for 50 years. Hey, we need you to help like finance this to get this done. Don't want to do an SBA deal. And so the bank said, all right.
And they go, wait a minute. First of all, you're selling the business? Yeah, we're done. Yeah, we're done.
Yeah. So it was one of those things. Kids didn't want to be part of it. They wanted, and so literally we just did a deal and they're like, hey, we understand the business. And I think I'm going to make the number up, but it's in the ballpark. They're like, all right, we'll finance 90% of the real estate and 80% of the assets. So it blended to be, I think we had to put down 12% or something in cash to do the deal.
Uh-huh.
But that's been pretty typical. And now that we're larger, we don't, we're in the traditional financing, like I mentioned, over $5 million. So now it just gets to the point where, we're going to banks, we're going to refinance our entire debt stack right now, restructure all of our companies, take advantage of kind of that C Corp holding company model with a bunch of different C's and LLCs underneath, moving everything around for tax and legal purposes. But then ultimately from that structure, then when we redo the debt stack, I'm just going to go say, hey, I want 4x EBITDA or 5x EBITDA. And, more or less every 12 months we'll review, and that's about it. But allows me to have a hunting license to just go do whatever we need to do. I don't need to be having conversations about individual deals or whatever else. As long as I meet the covenants and continue to grow, if I'm buying it too, it's pretty easy, right? You buy it 2x, continue to grow. You never have to worry about that 4x number. So
yeah,
that's where we're at right now. It's a totally different animal for financing.
Is that talking to private equity or hedge funds or somebody else to give you a kind of a basically rolling bank? Yeah.
No, we're going to do that with a regular traditional bank.
Oh, okay.
So start typically, you do over 5 million in EBITDA, you can find some regional folks that are interested in lending across the country, and they might get you to, 50 million, let's say, in total debt. And as you get bigger, you get into the 10, 15, $20 million EBITDA numbers, you just grow with the banks as they go. So,
yeah. So where are you at with the size of the businesses you're buying? Are you buying the larger 2 million, 10 million EBITDA businesses?
Yeah. I mean, we tend not to want those. We certainly don't want 10 million. But something that for us, we want to stay small, stuff that private equity doesn't want to buy, that individual buyers probably can't buy, but that fit in our roll-up picture. So we bought some as small, like some of the tuck-ins done like $130,000 a year, which is interesting. That one that we did it for 1x at 130, and it's going to do $1.2 million this year. And so you figure right now we're probably we could probably get 7, 8, 9 pretty easy on a multiple for private equity where we are. So you buy it at 1.
For that's the total holding company, right?
Yeah. So we can buy it we can do this a lot. We can buy them at 1 or 2, especially the impaired businesses. That's where the tuck-ins really add a lot of value. The beachheads, your kind of main businesses, you're not typically going to get. Those are probably more around 3 or 4, but we can still typically double, at a minimum, probably 30 to 50% increase in profitability within a couple of years. And then we'll pretty much double them once we get them to scale in size. So we'll be, eventually it'll be $100 million
On some of these tuck-ins or adjacent type of businesses, is it you see them because you can bring customers immediately to them?
No, so the tuck-ins we actually buy and shut down and move into one facility. So it would be a geographic. So
I see. Eliminating competitors. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's partly that it's most of those shops aren't sellable. So
but you got the equipment for them, which would have cost you $1 million.
We'll give them, we can take out the customer base, because the other option really, right? We always offer all those employees jobs because we're local, right? So we'll go buy our first one in a geographic area, and then we'll buy up some of the competition, if not all the competition around. There's a lot of them, they're not big enough. You can't go buy $130,000 company. It's impossible. You couldn't pay that. There's no debt service. How would you do it?
Yeah.
Impossible. Yeah. So we can essentially buy the book of business, take the equipment that we need, scrap the rest, and then the sellers can sell their real estate. And, that's kind of the playbook that we've had. And that's not I don't know if it's a novel playbook, but we haven't seen it in small manufacturing yet. And so we're just continuing to run this. And Josh Schultz, he's the president. He's just an operating savant. He's going to come in. We're going to do this. So this will be the first manufacturing platform we roll up, but we'll go do this exact same thing in another 3, 4, 5 years. Once we've done the foundry roll-ups, we're going to go figure out the next one we want to go do and just keep replicating.
Yeah. This. Where did you find him?
Twitter
on like SMB Twitter or something, exactly. Or what?
SMB Twitter. Yep. That's a huge community. And he and I happen to be, so I had the past president, the one that I hired kind of 2.5 years in. He was with us for a couple of years and decided that he wanted to go back and do what he used to be doing. And Josh was one of the few other folks in SMB Twit that were really big into everything that we were doing from a manufacturing standpoint. He was talking about operations, and quick version of the story is he more or less said, hey, I don't really want to do consulting. I don't want to work for anybody else. I just want to be able to run ops. But the only way I can really run operations and do it my way is I've learned I'm going to have to own it. And so I said, well, that's great. How do you want to structure it? And he said, well, I'll help you 18 to 24 months. But then at the end, you need to help me buy a business so that I can go back and run ops. And I was like, you just want to run operations? Like, that's what you really want to do? You don't want to be a CEO? And he said, no. I'm like, I have a way better plan than you just coming to work with us for like 18 months. How about just come on as like the president and COO? You don't have to barely talk to me for all I care if you don't want. Like, operations is not my thing. Dotting I's and crossing T's from a daily basis. I can do it through M&A just because it's, once, twice, 3 times a year process. I still hate it. I will soon be hiring an associate. I've decided after doing this last process.
What's the part that you hate about it?
Anything that's detail oriented. Like once it gets into the,
do you have ADHD or something, or just?
I'm certain I do.
Yeah.
But it just like, I don't know the best way to say it, but the individual stuff, I feel like that clogs my brain up, that I'm worried about making 97 decisions today, just never works out well for me. It's way better.
You end up making none.
Yeah. Like, and this is what we joke about. Josh and I easily have the same impact on a company each year, but he makes 1,000 decisions or helps his team make 1,000 decisions. I might make 1 or 4. Josh and I talk all the time, but I love just the M&A side of it. I spend a ton of time just developing relationships, talking with people. It's the running joke on a scale of 1 to 10 on extroversion, where 10 is a lot. I'm about a 63. So I need to be out. I love just figuring it out. And then the art of the deal is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But as soon as we get it to like,
you're done and you're moved on.
Yeah. I mean, it's so terrible. Like this is what the running joke was about this too. Like the first one I bought, I was so excited. Couldn't believe, like, driving in first 18 months, probably like, oh my God, I actually own this thing. The second one was probably like 6 months. The third and fourth ones were, I think I made it like 4 months when we were in New Hampshire. I made it like 2 months for the fifth one, a month and a half in Kansas City. I think I made it about 2 weeks for the last, the one we did in January, because Josh was busy the first 2 weeks. And this next one, like, I signed the LOI today, and I'm like, oh God, here we go again. So that timeline is compressing much greater, to the point where I love getting that signed, but now I'm definitely going to need an M&A associate, something here to start taking care of this, make sure I don't miss anything.
So if you're an M&A associate, get yourself on Twitter and follow
Exactly.
Reg.
Come find me. Like, you want to learn how to build and run businesses. We'll give you a crash.
It's almost like that story from that Uber, Travis Kalanick hiring his first vice president of business development from Twitter.
Yeah. Hire me. Yeah. You want to do this? Hire me. Exactly.
Hire me.
Like, it'll be that thing.
There you go. So you do definitely have plans to wash, rinse, repeat on this.
Yeah. So we've got a pretty easy, I mean, right now, if we had the bandwidth to absorb companies, really integrate them well, and Josh is doing a much better job of that every step of the way, and we had infinite financing, which the financing will be a lot easier to do than the integration. I mean, we'll have an easy path to 100 million plus in sales with this. And
with these 7 or more?
No, we'll probably do, I think we'll probably do another 10-ish.
10 to get to there.
But I mean, it'll be probably 3-4 years, something like that, or maybe 5. Depends on, part of it is I can't make these deals happen. It's the sellers that get to make the decision.
Yeah, you only have a pool of like 700 now, and they're like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink unless you make them thirsty enough.
Right. Yeah, and I refuse to overpay. So we'll pay what they're worth and what we can make them run at, but that's about it. So yeah, and that's just so we'll have a next plan, and we're developing things on the side where we'll just be able to go drop in the operating system of how, if you're running small manufacturing in this country, we'll be able to give you stuff, leverage cutting edge ERPs, and then all the back end systems we're putting around.
And those are all shared within the holding company.
Yeah, that's how we do it today. But then we'll figure out, right? The next thing becomes, do we want to be selling that? Do we want to have our own operating system?
Turn expense into a profit center.
Yeah, exactly. Like, do we want to be leveraging this out? Do we want to, we're creating, because we've outgrown most of the ability, you'd actually outsource a lot, fractional CFOs or accounting or marketing, but we're building all these back end systems. So we've got one that we're building right now in the Philippines. We've got one we're building right now in Monterey. So we've got our people hired that are doing data analytics and people that are able to program. Josh is an AI ML guy. So we're going to be putting in, some of the no code tools and some of the coding capable of seeing insights inside of the systems. Well, if you own 1 or 2 or 3 of these, you just have no ability to get that. So why don't we go give people leverage on how, and most of the platforms, right? They're not built to do small manufacturing. And there's hundreds of thousands of these things. I mean, there's just in Minneapolis alone, there's probably 2,500 machine shops in every single city that makes a product, which is quite literally almost everywhere, which people are shocked. Like, yes, that still happens in places like San Francisco and New York City and whatever. Like, it's not readily apparent and visible, but they're still there. And so all of that is a potential market. Or, we don't know if we want to do it. That's as much as helping other people try and figure out how to leverage this and making us more competitive in local manufacturing, which we obviously need to be, as we learned throughout COVID. So now the question becomes, what do we go do to figure out next? Do we go roll up another industry? Do we figure out how to help other industries make it? I mean, it's already not about the money for us. So it's got to be about something. It's got to be about a legacy. It's got to be about putting a dent in the universe. I say this, and it's the reason why I didn't put my name on the top of the company, but I really want people to turn around in 10, 15, 20 years and say, hey, those folks over at CaneCast, they literally changed the way that small foundries worked. And then we'll come up with a different name and we'll do the same thing in some other industry or bookkeeping or whatever else might be to help enable folks. So
interesting.
Yeah, I think we'll do it again. I mean, we have the playbook now. There's not really, it was 5.5 years. Not 5.5 years of misery, but certainly 2-3 years worth of misery. The hard
Yeah.
work is done now, though. So now it's
So
execution.
if you were to all the people behind you going, hey man, I'd love to do exactly what Reg does. What do you recommend, like the steps and dragons to avoid or to do this, that?
Yeah. So there's so many things, and I'll give a shameless plug, and it's not just me, but this SMB Twitter thing. You got to go follow. That didn't exist 5.5 years ago at all, at least not that I had any knowledge of. All the books that are, Walker Debell's the buy then build. There's all kinds of ETA resources. There's so many things out there that'll tell you about how you go buy a business. And if you think about how the number of people that start and are successful versus the number of people that buy and are successful is like a 10x difference.
Yeah, no, I've done the startup game. Yeah, it's a million. It's like that one movie. It's a million ways to die in the West.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, and that there's and you have the Lindy principle behind you in small business, right? Where if it's been around for 50 years, there's a really good likelihood it's going to be around for another 50. So
with or without you,
yeah, exactly. That's the best part. With or without you, I love that part. And so to me, like, that's where there's so many resources out there to learn. The simple answer, I always tell people, let's say you want to jump in. I don't care. Pick your W-2 income or pick how much ever money you want to take out of your business. If let's say it's 250,000, multiply that number by 3 or 4. That's the minimum you want to go look for in SDE. If people aren't familiar with that term, it's essentially EBITDA plus seller's benefits. So salary, cars, whatever. So if you want to make 250,000, go look for a business at a minimum of like 750. You can probably buy that for 4x. That's $3 million. You probably need 10 to 15% for an SBA. So, that really simple, like, all right, I need $400,000 and I can go buy a business. Then after you look through that, it's just a standard strategic M&A understanding, right? I mean, there's a lot of things, a lot of elements to look for. The ETAs of the world, which especially search funders, they look for things very different because they would hate my business. I'm like unbuyable for those folks because we have high capex and all the things that they would hate to see. But
U.S. Steel, man, you are Carnegie.
Like,
I got to pronounce that right. You're right on that earlier. Yeah.
But like it's and when you look at that, you got to go figure out like what you're willing to accept. You can't go buy a deal for 3x. You're gonna have hair on it somewhere. It's gonna have customer concentration.
No perfect customer. There's no perfect deal.
There's never, ever. And then so I talk to people that are looking to buy all the time and they want to eliminate everything. I'm like, not going to eliminate it. You're just going to figure out how to deal with it. So figure out if you're a great sales guy, don't be so worried about customer concentration because you're going to get it. If you're a tech person and that's what you need, great. Get in there and don't worry about it because you could probably go solve the problem of what a key person leaving would be. So figure out what you can minimize and risk from your background or what you can hire. And then get after it. It's, figuring out the customer moats. It's, it's all the stuff that Porter's 5 Forces and the standard marketing plan. And you don't have to sit down. I hate these folks that they write out a giant business plan or the bankers ask for.
Yeah, don't do that. You're just wasting. It's called procrastination.
Yeah, it's always the Mike Tyson. Like everybody has a strategy until you get punched in the face.
That's right.
It never. I mean, I like thinking out through it and making sure you understand the assumptions and whatnot. But for the most part, it's really about just finding something that you personally want to be part of, that you add value to. And that, it's on the bigger side that you can figure out how to mitigate risks that either you bring in or risks that the company brings to you.
Yeah. And let me give you a point there because I looked at an IT firm yesterday, had a meetings with the sellers, and most of their programmers were in Serbia. Mm-hmm. I said, look, great. I just don't know anything about Serbia. Serbia is really closely attached. The only country that didn't sign sanctions with Russia, just not 100% sure. So we passed on the deal. Yeah. There's too much risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And you never know. And again, and there might be somebody who's from Serbia or knows somebody in Serbia or who knows what, that's totally fine for that risk. Like
fine. That's mitigated.
You gotta, everybody's totally different. So what I look at as a deal that is unsellable or unbuyable for most people, totally impaired. I love it. Like, great. You guys We literally did this on one deal. Their top two customers were over 80% of the deal. But as soon as you dropped them inside our network, it meant nothing to me. Like, I don't know. They're like 3%.
As a
7%.
platform company, that would have been difficult. As a,
yeah. But for us, once you jump it inside of all of us, it's like, okay, no big deal. I mean, so that's a different risk mitigation. But at the same time, there's other things that we like. Our first one, we had the major risk that I initially identified, and this is still the same problem. It's actually substantially worse. And it's why foundries are almost impossible to buy now as individual buyers. You think about when everybody started to go overseas with product in the 80s and 90s, all that knowledge then left. So there are some people, but there weren't people coming in their 20s back in 1994. And so you fast forward, all those folks, when we bought this company the first time 5.5 years ago, they were in their early to mid 60s. Well, if you look at the industry 6 years later, 80% of that knowledge is gone.
That's that there was a episode of Bill Gates, some kind of Netflix, and talking about the brain drain for nuclear power plants left. Nobody here knows how to build nuclear plants. They got plans, but they haven't done one in such a long time that
they haven't built one in 30 years or whatever. You kind of forget because there's not a lot of people that are left.
Yeah, there's no experts, right?
But that's the exact same thing. So that was far and away my number one risk that I saw as and doing the first acquisition. So we went in our first 3 deals, actually. Our first, 4 of our first 5. We kept the key people on in a non-working. It was just knowledge. So the one guy we paid to just stay on he wanted to retire. We kept him on at halftime, so he didn't have to do any physical work. All we did was train people. We hired someone to help write down processes. We learned, and we've done that now 2 or 3 times. So now we've got a training academy, essentially, that we're building all the same knowledge. We can move people across our foundries. We can solve that key man risk. We don't have it. Like every other place we go talk to, though.
Those are definitely good routes for a bigger fish down the road. I mean,
and it's
the base that you're creating.
Yeah, because and that's where it's funny whenever we joke about this. People are like, it's like you actually had a plan. I'm like, some plan, some stumble into it. Yeah, you figure it out as you go. But but that's the big thing is, once you minimize the risk and identify it, then you just got to do whatever it takes. And you can't, the biggest thing, especially if you're going to buy a small company and you have key personnel risk, you just can't be held hostage by that. You have to figure out how to eliminate that risk, or else, you're essentially just owning the company for someone else to take advantage of you. So you got to figure out how to minimize risks there.
Yeah.
Same thing with big customers. It's no different. Got to diversify away. You can't let one big customer dictate.
Can you fix it? I mean, you got to ask yourself, can you fix it?
Yep.
Right?
Exactly right. Yep.
Reg, thank you so much for being on this show. This was very informative because I love this direction on this and the detail. So,
thanks for having me on. I love it. I'll tell anybody that's listening anything else. Not everybody should own your own small business, but if you choose to do it, find me on Twitter at Reg Zeller. There's a huge group. Like, I will do anything I can to help you. I will not encourage you to do it because it's a miserable, lonely existence at the beginning. Don't get me wrong.
Well, a lot of people want to live through that misery, though. So
exactly. I'm just but hey, once you're in, I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Thanks, John.
Yeah. And if you like this show, make sure you hit the like button and the bell so you can see more content like this. Thanks, Reg.
Thanks, John.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for watching this video. Make sure you're a subscriber by clicking on this button right here down below. And if you want to watch more serial acquirer interviews, click on this button right here. If you're ready to buy your first business, get my course at dealflowsystem.net right here. Take care. Cheers, John.